Thank you very much, Howard. But I did also invite General Malcaso as well, but General said that he's busy at the VMI. He said he'd take the institute first. Yeah. Yes, sir. And next gentleman I would like to introduce is the man with the integrity, with the honor, and he always looking after all the Vietnamese, from not just from East Coast, but all the way to the West Coast. If anyone of us haven't met him, especially the Vietnamese people, then you need to reach out to know who he is, because his heart is always with the Vietnamese people. Like I said, from East Coast to West Coast. My honor to present to you the Honorable Virginia State Senator, United States Marine Corps, Colonel Richard Black. Sir.
Well, thank you very much for the opportunity to be here. I want to welcome all of the people who will hear this overseas in Vietnam, because it will give you some insight into the truth about the Vietnam War that you probably have not heard. And those of you here, I want to refresh your recollection, because there may be some things that perhaps you have not heard, and I hope to bring some of that to you. With your permission, I'm going to take just a few moments before I talk about the resolution that we passed in the Virginia House, or the Virginia General Assembly. And I want to back up a little bit and talk to you about one of the crucial moments of the Vietnam War that really determined the outcome in many ways. There were various points, but this was one of the most crucial. And the first one, I'm actually going to read to you from a quote from Ho Chi Minh, which you might find sort of surprising, but I think you'll find it very interesting also. It was in November of 1963 that President John F. Kennedy signed Cable number 243, in which he authorized Secretary or the Ambassador Lodge to explore the possibility of a coup to overthrow the government of Vietnam. Now, we had been allies, we had been working together, but there had been some friction, some religious frictions that had occurred, and just like any nation, every nation has frictions, and so did Vietnam. But in any event, the Central Intelligence Agency was authorized to assist in carrying out a coup to overthrow the government of President Diem. Now, President Diem, like all national leaders, was a man of great complexity. And some people would say some negative things about him, but I'm going to tell you what I discern as being the essence of him. It's interesting. There was an Assistant Secretary of State, Roger Hilsman, and he wrote in his instructions going out to the State Department and the CIA, he said, we should encourage the coup group to fight the battle to the end and destroy the palace if necessary to gain victory against the legitimate government. Unconditional surrender should be the terms for the No family, since it will otherwise outmaneuver both the coup forces and the U.S. And then he said rather cryptically, he said, Diem should be treated as the general's wish. Well, I think he knew what the generals wished. And after Henry Cabot Lodge died in 1985, his loyal aide, Captain Mike Dunn, testified, and he said that on the day of the coup, that Colonel Dunn, American Colonel Dunn, offered to personally go to the hideout where Diem and his brother had gone to sort of wait out the coup. And Colonel Dunn asked the ambassador if he could escort the Diem brothers so that they would not be killed, and so that perhaps they could receive asylum. And Colonel Dunn said, I was really astonished that we did not do more for them. Henry Cabot Lodge refused to allow Colonel Dunn to go and to save the lives of the Diem brothers. And he later said, after they had been assassinated and shot, they were taken into captivity, they were taken into an armored personnel carrier, and they were executed rather brutally. And Ambassador Lodge said, what would we have done with them if they had lived? Very, very cruel, very heartless. To his credit, as near as I can discern, President Kennedy, when he received the news of the execution of the Diem brothers, he was somber and shaken. He blamed himself for approving Cable 4 or 243, which had authorized Ambassador Lodge to explore the coup options. And it shook him personally, and it bothered him as a moral and religious issue that the Diems had been executed and that he had been complicit in it. It was a shock that shook his confidence in the kind of advice that he was receiving about Vietnam. And unfortunately, our State Department has sometimes done this sort of thing. Here is probably the most definitive explanation of what happened. It comes not from the South Vietnamese, not from the Americans, but from Ho Chi Minh. And Ho Chi Minh, when he heard that the Diem had been killed, he said, I can scarcely believe that the Americans would be so stupid. Now, I say this with enormous respect for every American veteran. My blood is on the soil of Vietnam, and so is the blood of many of us in this room. I have the utmost respect, but our political leadership unfortunately led us in bad directions. The North Vietnamese Politburo said, Diem was one of the strongest individuals resisting the people and communism. Everything that could be done in an attempt to crush the revolution was carried out by Diem. Diem was one of the most competent lackeys of the U.S. imperialists. Among the anti-communists in South Vietnam, no one has sufficient political assets and abilities to cause others to obey. Therefore, the lackey administration cannot be stabilized. Very interesting. The assassination of the Diem brothers bolstered North Vietnam's efforts to characterize South Vietnam as supporters of colonialism, which it was not. President Diem had done some enormously wonderful things for the country. He had built major industries. They had instituted laws to tighten the moral fabric, increase the morality of the people in Vietnam. He had established the Hamlet program that armed the Vietnamese, sort of like our Second Amendment, so that they would be the militia to fight against the guerrillas who came in. So he did wonderful things, and I think it is a great tragedy, unfortunately, that he did not survive, because he did not want to have a large American buildup, and as a consequence, when he was gone, I joined the Marines 23 days after he was assassinated. I didn't know about details, but I found out later, and of course I went off and fought in Vietnam. I flew 249 combat missions as a pilot, then I fought on the ground with the 1st Marine Regiment and made 70 combat patrols in the 1st and the 2nd Battalions of the 1st Marine Regiment. And on the final patrol, I had already been detached. I was ready to go home, and in the middle of the night, I heard the artillery flares going off, and in the distance there was a dim orange light, and I thought, I can't stay back and let them go. And I went and I ran into my radio man, who was also supposed to catch the next flight back home, Henry Smith. I said, Henry, what are you doing out here, Corporal Smith? Corporal Smith, what are you doing out here? And he laughed at me. He said the same thing you are, sir. He said, I couldn't let them go without me. And we fought our way to the Hoi An River, and then when we crossed the river, Corporal Smith was killed, and he is now buried in Pennsylvania. He sacrificed his life for other Marines. He sacrificed his life for the people of Vietnam. Now, that brings me up to current times. In 1912, I noticed that what had happened is that all of a sudden, the attitude towards Vietnam veterans had changed. People were saying, thank you for your service. And Vietnam veterans almost had this aura about them. There was sort of something different. You know, they had fought in jungles, and they had fought at night with no night vision equipment. So all of a sudden it changed. But I thought about the people of South Vietnam, the people who were the soldiers and the sailors, the airmen of the Republic of Vietnam. And it troubled me because I had fought so closely. I had a Vietnamese soldier killed 10 feet from me, or shot in the thigh. I'm sorry, he was not killed. But we served directly in the same units with the Vietnamese, and they were very courageous. And yet, we talked to them as well. You know, they're sort of a footnote to the Vietnam War, but they were not a footnote. And so, with your permission, thanks to my wife, who is very heroic, I have prepared a presentation that I'm going to go through. This was prepared by the Senate of Virginia with the concurrence of the House in 2013. It doesn't deal much with Americans. It deals with the Republic of Vietnam, with the soldiers, with the people of the Republic of Vietnam, and with the heroism of those people, because there's plenty said about Americans. And I'll give you a little bit of the history. We have a firm policy in the General Assembly that we do not engage in foreign policy. And so there was a great deal of opposition to this, and they immediately turned it down. They said, we will not hear this. And so I was sitting at my desk one day, and I was looking. We have 40 members of the Senate, and I looked across the room, and there was Senator Toddy Puller. Senator Puller had been married to Lou Puller, the hero, well, he was a hero, and his father was probably the greatest hero of the Marine Corps. And I went over to her and I said, Toddy, I said, they're telling me that I can't have my resolution heard. I said, I need to have you co-sponsor. She studied it for half an hour. She sent it back to me with her signature on it as a co-sponsor. So then I worked all of the Democrats. I said, oh, Toddy says this is fine. She and I are putting this through, so they all started signing. And once I got most of the Democrats, then I came back to my own side. I'm a Republican. I got all of the conservative Republicans to sign. And then I started working up. And finally, we only had a handful of people who were not co-sponsors of the resolution. And so I went back to the chairman of the committee. I said, look, I said, everybody's co-sponsoring in the Senate. I said, you've got to hold a hearing. So he held a hearing, and Dick Sasslaw, Senator Dick Sasslaw, who is a friend of mine on the Democrat side, he had been the most adamant opponent. He said, the war is over. He said, we're not going to talk about it. And so I gave my presentation about the heroism of the South Vietnamese, and I said, almost everybody here has signed on as a co-sponsor. And Dick Sasslaw, to his credit, he has a way of saying things that I can't quite repeat, and I'm not sure that I would want to repeat in this mixed company, but the gist of it was, oh, to heck with it. Let's just go ahead and pass it. And so we passed it unanimously in the Senate, and we went over to the House. We had a delegate there who had served time in the diplomatic corps of South Korea. He began getting co-sponsors. Delegate Bob Marshall on the Republican side. Before long, we pushed the resolution through, and now this is the law of Virginia. I did this because, not so much for you. Part of it was a thanks to you who have fought. But I think about the old man who sits in a hut in Vietnam, and all through his life he's had to bite his tongue while his sons, his grandson, his great-grandson are being taught about the South Vietnamese and what they did. And I wanted to get this into South Vietnam so that people understand the truth, the heroism of the people. And so I want to say a special word of thanks to Vic Nguyen, who was a magnificent, Vic Nguyen? Vic Nguyen? Yes. He was a magnificent translator, and he has translated it exquisitely. He spent a lot of time to make sure that everything was precisely accurate. And so now I'm going to go through this, and perhaps we will omit a lot of the whereases and the fancy language, and I will read the English, and I'll stop, and then I will let you read we'll go through a few lines, and then you do a few lines. Okay. This was passed in 2013. Whereas the South Vietnamese Americans, a proud, industrious people, make up the fourth largest group of Asian Americans in the United States, and a South Vietnamese mass immigration to the United States began when communist tyranny swept the former Republic of Vietnam after the fall of Saigon in 1975.
Thưa quý vị, trước giờ đọc từng nghị sĩ đọc ra, tôi xin đọc lại bằng phần tiếp theo. Xét về những người Mỹ gốc Nam Việt Nam, một dân tộc oai hùng và cần mẫn, hiện là nhóm người Mỹ gốc Á lớn nhất, lớn thứ tư trên đất Mỹ, và xét về một quốc dân vĩ đại của người Việt Nam đã sang Hoa Kỳ khi bạo viện Cộng sản chiếm xong miền Nam Việt Nam Cộng Hòa sau ngày Sài Gòn thất thủ vào năm 1975.
Whereas to the very end, soldiers of the Army of the Republic of Vietnam fought valiantly, defending their freedom with skill, daring, and gallantry. The ARVN 3rd Cavalry Regiment, for example, demonstrated such skill and heroism in battle that it was awarded the coveted United States Presidential Unit Citation, and nearly 60,000 American fighters died in the Vietnam War, and some 224,000 South Vietnamese also fell defending their nation.
Xét về cho đến phút chót, những binh sĩ trong quân lực Việt Nam Cộng Hòa đã kiên cường chiến đấu để bảo vệ nền tự do của họ một cách tài tình, táo bạo và can đảm. Như trường hợp lữ đoàn 3 thì bên quân lực Việt Nam Cộng Hòa đã chứng minh sự dũng cảm và tài nghệ trong chiến đấu, đến độ được lãnh huy chương Tổng thống Hoa Kỳ dành cho đơn vị. Và xét thì gần 60.000 chiến sĩ Hoa Kỳ đã hy sinh trong chiến tranh Việt Nam và 224.000 binh sĩ quân lực Việt Nam Cộng Hòa đã nằm xuống để bảo vệ quốc gia của họ.
Although the American sacrifice in Vietnam was enormous, some of the most bitter combat, including the savage warfare after the United States withdrawal, was shouldered principally by our South Vietnamese allies. And whereas the 1968 Communist Tet Offensive was designed to crack South Vietnam's will to resist, instead, South Vietnamese fought fiercely, and not a single unit collapsed and ran. Indeed, even the police fought, turning pistols against heavily armed enemy regulars.
Và xét vì mặc dù sự hy sinh của người Mỹ rất to lớn ở Việt Nam, một số trận chiến khắc nghiệt nhất, kể cả một cuộc chiến dã man sau khi Hoa Kỳ đã rút khỏi Việt Nam, đã được gánh vác chủ yếu bởi các đồng minh Nam Việt Nam của chúng ta. Và xét vì tổng công kích Tết Mậu Thân năm 1968 của Việt Cộng sản là nhằm bẻ gãy ý chí chống lại Cộng sản của nhân dân miền Nam, quân lực Việt Nam Cộng Hòa đã chống trả quyết liệt và không một đơn vị nào bỏ chạy hay tan hàng, thực hiện đến ngay cảnh sát cũng hăng say chiến đấu, dùng súng lục chống lại quân chính quy của địch được võ trang đầy đủ.
Whereas together with American soldiers, sailors, airmen, and Marines, the ARVN decimated the indigenous Viet Cong guerrillas, eliminating them as an effective fighting force for the remainder of the war, and most American units had left Vietnam by 1972. Yet South Vietnamese units continued to perform remarkably well, limited American help. They defeated North Vietnam's all-out Easter offensive, a massive conventional invasion led by Soviet T-54 tanks.
Cùng với bộ binh, thủy quân, không quân và thủy quân lục chiến của Hoa Kỳ, quân lực Việt Nam Cộng Hòa tấn diệt bộ đội du kích Huy Cầu, loại trừ hẳn thành phần này ra như một binh đội còn có khả năng chiến đấu trong phần còn lại của cuộc chiến. Hầu hết các đơn vị chiến đấu của quân Hoa Kỳ đã rời Việt Nam vào năm 1972. Các đơn vị quân lực Việt Nam Cộng Hòa đã tiếp tục chiến đấu rất hào hùng chỉ với một sự giúp đỡ tối thiểu của Mỹ, đánh bại tổng công kích ngoài rọ lửa năm ấy. Một cuộc xâm lăng quy mô và hủy ước trên toàn miền có chiến xa T-54 của Liên Xô nhận được.
The Easter offensive victory helped force North Vietnam to accept a negotiated end to the war. Sadly, in 1974, the United States withdrew most military support, including air power, severely restricting the flow of fuel and munitions to the ARVN. Strangled by lack of supplies, tanks and artillery pieces were allotted meager quantities of ammunition, sometimes just a few shells a day, and radios often had no batteries.
Chính chiến thắng của quân lực Việt Nam Cộng Hòa vào mùa hè đó đã buộc Bắc Việt phải chấp nhận kết thúc chiến tranh qua thương thảo, thiết tha vào năm 1974, Hoa Kỳ đã rút cầu bằng cách giảm gần hết yểm trợ quân sự, kể cả không lực, cách nghiêm trọng việc cung cấp dầu xăng và đạn dược cho Việt Nam. Giờ đây bị bóp nghẹt bởi thiếu hết quân trang, quân cụ, trong khi chiến xa và pháo đài chỉ được phát một số lượng rất nhỏ đầu đạn, có khi súng đến dài quả, thậm chí đến các bộ truyền tin không có cả biên để xử lý.
The strangulation of South Vietnamese supply lines destroyed morale and decimated combat power, making it impossible for even the bravest South Vietnamese troops to effectively defend against final invasion by North Vietnamese soldiers. North Vietnam remained well supplied by its communist allies in China and the Soviet Union.
Việc thắt chặt các đường dây tiếp tế cho quân lực dân Cộng hòa đã làm suy sụp tinh thần và khả năng chiến đấu của họ, làm cho việc chiến đấu của ngay những đơn vị can thiệp nhất của Việt Nam cũng không thể thực hiện được trước cuộc xâm lăng chót của quân Bắc Việt, và lúc đó vẫn được cung cấp đầy đủ và đồng minh Trung Cộng và Liên Xô.
Everyone with ties to the Americans or the government of the Republic of Vietnam feared the threatened communist reprisals as communist forces overran the South during the spring of 1975. 175,000 key South Vietnamese personnel were airlifted from South Vietnam to refugee centers in the United States, and as American troops and embassy staff were evacuated by waiting aircraft, terrified South Vietnamese mothers thrust their babies into the hands of complete strangers, hoping their offspring might somehow survive the approaching bloodbath.
Bởi tất cả mọi người có liên hệ với Mỹ hay chính quyền Việt Nam Hoa Kỳ rất lo ngại việc làm trả thù tệ hại của Cộng sản. Đến giờ phút chót, trong khi quân đội Cộng sản tràn xuống Việt Nam vào mùa xuân năm 1975, 125.000 nhân viên then chốt Việt Nam Cộng hòa đã được không nhận từ miền Nam sang các trại tị nạn của Hoa Kỳ ngay trong lúc binh lính bị. Và nhân viên sứ quán Hoa Kỳ được trực thăng đến đó, thì có những bà mẹ Việt Nam kinh hãi ném ngay con mình vào tay những người hoàn toàn xa lạ, chỉ để mong làm sao cho con mình thoát được cảnh tấm máu xảy ra.
Whereas the promised reign of terror quickly emerged, and the South Vietnamese desperately fled the murderous tyranny of the communists, roughly 2 million South Vietnamese fled to escape North Vietnam's promised people's paradise. And launching small, crowded sampans, many South Vietnamese sailed into the vast, treacherous waters of the South China Sea, where hundreds of thousands drowned in the escape attempts. The South Vietnamese continued to flee their country in huge numbers from 1975 until mid-1980s.
Chế độ Cộng hòa xuất hiện gần như tất cả nên người Việt miền Nam đã trong tuyệt vọng trốn chạy ở viện sát sinh cộng sản, đưa đến khoảng 2 triệu người vô tình cách trốn khỏi thiên đường nhân dân do cộng sản Bắc Việt hứa hẹn. Đi bằng những con thuyền mỏng manh, chật nước. Rất nhiều người miền Nam đã liều lĩnh ra khơi, đi vào sóng gió, bão táp của Biển Đông, đem lại cái chết của hàng trăm ngàn người chìm xuống đáy đại dương. Mặc dù vậy, những con số khổng lồ về Việt Nam đã tiếp tục ra đi từ năm 1975 đến giữa thập niên năm 1980.
Beginning in 1975 and for decades afterwards, well over 1 million South Vietnamese, especially military officers and government employees, were imprisoned in communist concentration camps. These were euphemistically called re-education camps, where many thousands of South Vietnamese were educated to their deaths. And the communist concentration camps were characterized by brutal, forced labor, political indoctrination, and deadly engagements like human mind clearing. There were no formal charges or trials, and the conditions in the camps were so savage that many surviving inmates estimate that almost 1/3 of the prisoners of war died while in captivity.
Bắt đầu từ năm 1975 và kéo dài hàng thập niên sau đó, hơn 1 triệu người Việt Nam, đặc biệt là các cựu sĩ quan và công chức chính phủ, bị đưa vào các trại tập trung mà gọi cách hiền lành là các trại cải tạo. Nơi đó, nhiều ngàn người đã bị cải tạo đến chết. Những trại tập trung của Cộng sản nổi tiếng qua các chế độ khổ sai, tàn bạo, nhồi sọ về chính trị, những nhiệm vụ chết người như đi chân đất, dò miền, không hề qua những thủ tục cáo buộc tội trạng để xét xử tòa án. Những điều kiện trong trại tai hại đến mức nhiều người sống sót cho rằng gần 1/3 các tù binh đã chết trong thời gian bị cầm tù.
South Vietnamese immigration to the United States peaked in 1992 when, after decades of torture, many concentration camp survivors were finally released and sponsored by their families to come to this country. And after persevering through unimaginable brutality and suffering, South Vietnamese who escaped their homeland demonstrated admirable talent and intellect. It became an entrepreneurial, upwardly mobile group whose poverty rate rapidly declined after their arrival in the United States.
Con số di cư của người Việt Nam sang Hoa Kỳ lên đến năm 1992. Khi sau hàng thập niên bị tra tấn, nhiều người sống sót từ trại tập trung nói trên cuối cùng mới được thả ra và được bảo trợ với gia đình họ sang. Sau khi chịu cực hình qua nhiều năm và người không thể tưởng tượng những người miền Nam đã trốn được khỏi quê hương, đã tỏ ra tài năng và thông minh vượt vượt để trở thành một nhóm người dám vào thương trường và tìm đường thăng tiến, giải quyết chống biến những bước đầu nghèo khổ sau khi đến Hoa Kỳ.
Today, 82% of the South Vietnamese in the United States are native-born or naturalized citizens, an exceptionally high proportion of American citizenship for any immigrant group. And for several decades, South Vietnamese American patriots have contributed to the United States intellect, skill, loyalty, and determination. Many have proudly served in the armed forces of the United States of America.
Ngày nay, 82% người Việt Nam có mặt tại Hoa Kỳ là những người sinh trưởng ở đây, hay là người đã có quốc tịch Hoa Kỳ, một tỷ lệ rất cao trong nhóm di dân. Qua nhiều thập niên, những người Mỹ yêu nước gốc Nam Việt Nam đã đóng góp đáng kể vào nước Mỹ với trí tuệ, tài năng, quyết tâm trung thành của họ với không ít con em làm phục vụ cách hãnh diện trong quân lực Hoa Kỳ. Do đó,
We won't read any further, but I will tell you that then the Senate resolved that this day would be recognized henceforth as a day to recognize the South Vietnamese for their heroism, for their contributions, and in no way was it ever intended to displace the other very important holidays on this date, but simply to supplement it and to say that we join you